Today's meeting of the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Advisory Board is called to order on November 14th. Everyone welcome. At this time, I'm going to recess the NAHAB meeting and call to order the fourth and final meeting of the 2023 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance of the chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. To ensure a complete record of the committee's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. I'll ask the committee members to introduce themselves and identify the fields in which they represent. We'll start over here.
Robin Field, residential lending.
Pierre Cornoyer, building contractor and residential developer.
Camille Hepting, I represent employers within the city of Clearwater.
David Harder with Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services, nonprofit development.
Bruce Rector, Vice Chair of the City of Clearwater Community Development Board.
And I'm the board chair, Kevin Chennault, and I represent the nonprofit providers in Clearwater. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the committee's October 24th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve item 2.1?
Move approval.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. We've had some great discussions over the last three meetings, some profitable conversations. Each of us on this committee has a genuine appreciation for the importance of affordable housing and the affordable housing issues in Clearwater. The work we've done as a committee is documented in an update to the city's Local Housing Initiative Strategies Report. Updates in the report resulting from our discussions and recommendations are shown in strike-through and underlined format. Following Ms. Warner's presentation, I'll call for a motion to approve the updated report. Ms. Warner, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Chair, committee members.
Good morning.
All right, welcome. We're here today for the public hearing for the Local Housing Incentive Strategy Update. Just to review the schedule, we started this back on August 8th when city staff designated the AHAC members and requested approval of those AHAC members by city resolution. On September 7th, the City Council appointed those members to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We've met 3 times in September through October to workshop the Local Housing Incentive Strategy, reviewing the previous report that was completed in 2022, and then going through that report and updating it to current in review of current city practices. Today, as I mentioned, we're at the public hearing stage. This is where the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee reviews the draft report, and if it's to the committee's satisfaction, approves that report to go forward to the City Council on December 7th. Ultimately, this will be incorporated into the Local Housing Assistance Plan. That's a required document for the SHIP grant that the city receives for affordable housing. And that would be incorporated at the end of this year and then moved forward to March 31st, 2024 when the Local Housing Assistance Plan is adopted. Ultimately, this will be submitted to the state in May. So that's where we are with the schedule. As I mentioned, we've had 3 workshop-style meetings, one on September 12th, one on October 3rd, and one on October 24th. Today is the AHAC public hearing, and then there will be a City Council public hearing upcoming on December 7th. In review of the changes to the values, principles, and vision resulting from the last 3 meetings, the affordable housing values, the committee made changes to value letter C, I should say, revising that to say aspires to have housing that fits the city's workforce. Additionally, the committee added an additional value, D, everyone deserves a safe, affordable home. That has made it into the draft report that you have before you today. Affordable housing principles. There were 6 affordable housing principles in the Local Housing Incentive Strategy report. The committee made a change to principle number 6 to strike the word non-affordable, and so now it says incentivize to promote incorporation of affordable housing into all housing developments. The affordable housing vision, there was one minor additional word added to the affordable housing vision statement, and that was to add the word accessible, making sure that housing is safe, accessible, affordable, sustainable, energy, and cost efficient. So that concludes the changes to the values, principles, and vision that were proposed during the last 3 meetings and were incorporated into the local housing incentive strategy report. Just to review, the local housing incentive strategies that are required to be reviewed, and this is per Florida statute, corresponding to the SHIP program, there are 11 incentive areas: expedited review process, modification of fees, flexible densities, infrastructure capacity, accessory dwelling units, parking reductions, flexible lot configurations, modifications of street requirements, pre-adoption policy consideration, inventory of public lands, and proximity to transportation, employment, and mixed-use development. These are the 11 incentive areas that are required to be reviewed by the committee. Additionally, there are several AHAC initiative incentive areas that were added to the report over the last few sessions of the AHAC, and these are adaptive reuse, the land development code, the communication and marketing of affordable housing, financing, and partnerships. So in total, with the 11 required incentive areas and these additional AHAC-initiated incentive areas, there are 16 total incentive areas in the local housing incentive strategy report. So looking back at the committee discussion over the last 3 meetings, the committee identified 6 barriers and incentives to affordable housing. Those were investor real estate and short-term rental competition. At the last meeting, the committee added limited housing supply and inventory, third-party barriers, for example, interest rates, debt service, property taxes, and insurance premiums, and the construction costs and supply issues surrounding affordable housing. Another barrier to affordable housing was NIMBYism, or not in my backyard, and misconceptions about affordable housing. There was an identified need for public and political will and workforce housing advocacy. Also identified was the need to work with housing providers and landlords, for example, landlord liaison or caseworker, rehab assistance, rebates, etc., other incentives in that area. And then there was discussion of affordability monitoring requirements as a barrier. Lastly, rental assistance and gap funding. It was noted that rental assistance is not keeping up with market rents, and there's a lack of other assistance available, so things like utility payments that can help offset some of those housing costs. So part 2, recommendations. This was the committee direction that we received most recently on October 24th. That was the last committee's meeting. Changes were made to recommendation 1.1, adding clarification that this recommendation was referring to single-family projects. So this was a modification with clarification. Recommendation 1.2 similarly added a clarification that this recommendation was referring to multifamily affordable housing projects. 1.3, there was a modification added to specify a timeline for implementation of the list of potential mentors experienced in affordable housing development, and that timeline was to complete that task by the end of the first quarter of 2024 and then update that annually thereafter. Recommendation 1.4, this was revised to also add a timeline, so instead of review and annually update, develop the brochure by end of first quarter 2024 and annually update thereafter. So again, adding a timeline for implementation of this recommendation. Recommendation 1.5, there was clarification made at, I believe, the second AHAC meeting to clarify that this was building example plans rather than a template, perhaps adding clearer language regarding that. So this was a modification to change the language. And then additionally, there was a NAHAB assignment added here. So city staff is to provide a mid-year progress report regarding the provision of an affordable housing mentor list, development of a brochure, and the success of the template building example plan submittal. So the NAHAB will be working on this throughout the coming year, and then we'll report, city staff will report back mid-year, and then the next convening of the AHAC will review this recommendation again. 2, modification of fees. This was recommendation 2.2. Added more specificity here with regard to the timeline, rather than continue to. Now it says annually assess the financial, legal, and administrative feasibility of reducing, refining, or redefining the cost of impact fees or permitted fees related to development. 3, flexible densities, recommendation 3.1. This was revised to add reference to state legislation regarding density flexibility, including but not limited to the recent Live Local Act. 5.2, because the city is currently going through a comprehensive update process now, this was revised to reflect the new comprehensive policy references. So this is new policies that are corresponding to the previous policies that were there. So it's new numbers QP 6.1.7 and QP 6.1.10. So now it reads, implement City Council Comprehensive Policy QP 6.1.7 and Policy QP 6.1.10 to allow accessory dwelling units by providing corresponding standards in the Community Development Code. Such standards may include, and then it lists the standards to be considered. So this was really just updated to reflect those new policy references and then implementation. 9.2, this is under pre-adoption policy consideration. This recommendation 9.2 was updated to reference the state legislation so that when the city reviews through the senior executive team any regulatory instruments created in the city, they're also reviewing impacts of state legislation as well. Inventory of public lands, 10.5. There was actually no change to this recommendation. However, after the AHAC's discussion, there was a NAHAB assignment given that city staff will discuss the scoring matrix with the NAHAB in more detail and then provide a progress report to the 2024 AHAC when reconvened. And that's noted in the Local Housing Incentive Strategy report in reference to this recommendation. Proximity to transportation, employment, and mixed-use development, recommendation 11.1 was revised. Again, this was revised in response to the city's comprehensive plan update process. So this was made more general. So the city will maintain and implement policies of the city's comprehensive plan that incentivize affordable housing development proximate to transportation hubs, major employment centers, and mixed-use developments. Over the course of the year, as the comprehensive plan is adopted, when the AHAC reconvenes next year, this will be revisited again for specific policy references, but because of the transitional state right now of the comprehensive plan, this was brought in to be more generalized, so that'll be reviewed next year. Adaptive reuse, 12.1. Some additions were added to this recommendation. The committee wanted to promote adaptive reuse, not just allow, but also actively promote adaptive reuse. Additional types of uses were mentioned, so old hotels, office buildings, and malls. And then reference to the Live Local Act was added as well. Land Development Code 13.1. This was modified to add reference to electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. 14, communication and marketing of affordable housing. This recommendation was not revised. However, a NAHAB assignment was given. In relation to communication and marketing of affordable housing, city staff will continue to work with the NAHAB to learn and benchmark what other communities are doing in this incentive area. And then hopefully by the next convening of the AHAC, there will be some suggestions or recommendations made regarding improvement of communication and marketing materials. Financing. There were 2 recommendation revisions under financing. One was to 15.1, adding reference to financial assistance to obtain affordable housing. This was made so that this recommendation would not just be limited to construction and maintenance, but also to other forms of financial assistance to actually obtain affordable housing. And then 15.3 is a new recommendation. That new recommendation reads, ensure city staffing levels are adequate to achieve the AHAC recommendations of the LHIS report. And then finally, 16, partnerships. There were several modifications made to this recommendation. One was to add reference to major employers. So we have a new statement under there to establish partnerships with major employers to coordinate the supply of workforce housing. The other one was to engage lenders in training and ongoing discussions with the city. So that was discussed as well, a lender training program. And then finally, the last bullet there, partner with the private sector and nonprofits to address third-party barriers to affordable housing and to identify appropriate incentives to reduce labor and material costs for developers, and long-term maintenance, operational, and insurance costs for homeowners. So that was revised to reference the long-term aspect of affordability as well as operational concerns. So that was the change to 16. So with that, the next meeting will be with City Council. That will be a public hearing on December 7th. That will be here in the Clearwater Main Library. If there's any questions in the meantime, those can be directed to Chuck Lane, Assistant Director of Economic Development and Housing. And that concludes my presentation, and with that, we're asking the committee today to approve the Local Housing Incentive Strategy Report to move forward to City Council.
Board members are not required to attend the council meeting, but you're more than welcome, of course.
Thank you. Does anyone from the public wish to speak to this item? If so, please step to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Ms. Call, do we have any comments submitted by e-comment?
No, sir.
Thank you. At this moment, I will close public comment. May I have a motion to approve the 2023 Local Housing Incentive Strategies Report update?
So moved.
I have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is there anyone here to speak on items not on today's agenda? If so, please step to the podium and state your name and spell your last name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda.
My name is Beth Davis, D-A-V-I-S, and I'm really here to thank you. I'll be short. I've been living here for 37 years. I'm here as a member of the Clearwater Alliance for Housing. I've missed 2 of your sessions, but I want to thank each of you for your time and work on this project for the future of housing in Clearwater, because I think we all know we can get better and build more, no matter how hard it is. I hope to hear today, and I already did, the improvements and goals for 2024. And when you present to council, there was so much detail here. I hope that you'll give some headlines about the progress and be very proud of the progress you've made, because you have made it. And 16.1 and 13.2, it's hard to understand just what you've done. So I'm looking forward to that. We know every plan that gets put together takes 5 years to complete. It's exciting. Habitat's here to make a difference on the next piece of property that's possibly a Habitat house. We too, in our group, are working to continue to gather experts from our community with background and experience to help build and innovate housing in Clearwater for the people who work here, for the many families who would like to see the next generation be able to live here. So, for instance, we're working with Maggie Rogers, Executive Director, Catholic Charities. We are trying to do some of the legwork and bring partnerships to the table for you and for the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Ms. Call, any e-comments on this one? Thank you. This concludes the work of the 2023 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'd like to provide an opportunity for the committee members to share any final comments that you may have. Any comments that you'd like to share? I would like to personally thank each and every one of you for your hard work and dedication over the last 6 weeks, whatever it's been. We've been at this quite often, and I appreciate your time and your support of the city in this project. So those are my comments. The affordable and housing, Mr. Lane, do you have any comments that you'd like to share?
I just want to echo your comments and thank the board. This is a commitment that you all made. We do this every year now by statute, so there's a little bit of, kind of rinse and repeat going on. But the discussion that you are all having is invaluable. We're refining our incentives, and it's important. And we have the NAHAB that is a year on board that's going to help keep staff accountable to continue to roll forward and move forward on these incentives. So I really appreciate your work. I appreciate your commitment and your dedication to our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we have given the NAHAB quite a bit to do over the next coming year. This Affordable Housing and Advisory Committee meeting is adjourned, and we will reconvene today's Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board meeting. Committee members not serving on the NAHAB may step down from the dais at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Conway, thank you.
Everyone, welcome to today's meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board. I think we can forego introductions. We introduced ourselves earlier in today's meeting. So let's move.
That's me.
Oh,
I was at the
thank you. You were.
I was at the college.
Would you please introduce yourself?
Evidently, I can't read. But anyway, Linda Byers, I'm a citizen, resident, and an advocate for all affordable housing in the city of Clearwater.
Thank you, Lyndon. You weren't only a couple seconds late. Thank you.
Listen, I got every red light too.
Yeah.
First order of business is to approve the minutes of the board's August 8th, 2023 meeting. May I have a motion to approve item 2.1?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes are,
Should I abstain because I wasn't part of the committee at that point in time, or doesn't it really matter?
it does not really matter.
Okay, all right.
Minutes are approved. Thank you. Citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to wish to speak on items not on today's NAHAB agenda? If so, please step to the podium, state your name, and spell your last name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda. Ms. Call, any e-comments at this point? Thank you. I will close public comment at this time. Next item on the agenda is item 4.1. Recommendation to the City Council for approval of the real property transfer agreement for the donation of real property by the city to Habitat for Humanity of Pinellas County Incorporated. Mr. Mayo will present this item, but before we hear from him, I'd like to ask each board member to consider whether a conflict of interest exists for your vote. I'm not sure if a conflict exists, but because of their wide work of supporters, we think it's important to ask this question. A few of us on this board may have volunteered or partnered with the various projects. We do not necessarily establish that as a conflict of interest. Habitat employees have served on this board previously, but it is no longer the case. If anyone thinks they may have a conflict, speak now, and with the help of Ms. Call, we'll help to determine whether anyone needs to recuse himself or herself from this vote. Any potential conflicts? With no conflicts, we will ask for the presentation. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Dylan Mayu, Senior Real Estate Coordinator for Economic Development and Housing. City-owned property located at 406 Vine Avenue is 0.115 acres and is designated with medium-density residential zoning. Vine was acquired by the city as a consequence of a tax foreclosure in 2010 and is currently listed on the city's affordable housing inventory list. I completed a staff opinion of value on September 6, 2023, yielding a fair market value of $83,350. In accordance with the city's procedure to surplus and disposition property on the affordable housing inventory list, staff released a surplus notice to the list of interested developers on August 16, 2023. Per the procedure, developers on the list were given 15 days to respond to the notice. 3 developers responded within the response window: Habitat for Humanity, Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services, and Affordably Lavish Foundation. Of the 3 respondents, Habitat for Humanity scored the highest on the scoring rubric. Due to the fact that the property is in the North Greenwood CRA, an additional opportunity for responses was provided on October 13, 2023. Staff advertised a request for letters of interest for the acquisition and development of Vine Avenue in accordance with the relevant state statute 163.380. Considering all responses, staff is recommending the donation of the property to Habitat for Humanity for the deed-restricted use of affordable housing. Per their response, Habitat anticipates the vertical construction of a single-family home will commence within 6 months, and the sale of that home will occur within 12 months of acquisition. Habitat's response also highlighted their commitment to incorporating energy-efficient features and electrical vehicle charging capabilities within the home. Be happy to address any questions at this time.
Any comments or questions
I
from?
do have a deed restricted, has a restrictive covenant that it be sold to an income-eligible buyer? Is that-
Correct. It will have a lure on it.
Correct. Land use restriction agreement.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Thank you for your hard work in this. We met yesterday, and it's obvious that you spent some time, and I appreciate your time on that.
Yep.
Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? Ms. Call, do we have any e-comments on this item? Thank you. Hearing no further public comment, may I have a motion to approve?
A motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 4.2. Recommend City Council approval of this substantial amendment to the City of Clearwater's fiscal year 2021-2022 annual action plan and authorize the city to modify existing agreements and enter into new agreements with organizations approved for funding. Ms. Perez will present this item.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So, as everyone is aware, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development provided a one-time allocation of $1,637,567 in Home ARP, American Rescue Plan, funding to the City of Clearwater. HUD requires Home ARP funding to be used to support specific qualifying populations defined as populations experiencing homelessness, at risk of homelessness, and other requiring supportive services for homelessness prevention. A substantial amendment is required to reprogram funds and exceeds of 25% of the Home ARP allocations. In June 2022, the first substantial amendment was approved by City Council to add Home ARP funding allocations to the city physical, I always pronounce this wrong, so fiscal year 2021-22 annual action plan. The second substantial amendment is we adjusted the budget. So changes to allocation plan are as follows. We have supportive services. Allocated amount is, this is a long one, $691,398. Activities allowed under this category include but are not limited to rent and utility assistance, move-in assistance for families, homelessness prevention, housing support, and services referrals for that specific population. Then we have development of affordable rental housing. Allocated amount is $200,000. Development of affordable rental housing. Allocated amount is $500,000. Instead of listing specific subrecipient names, we're using more of a general category for Home ARP approved activities. This will provide us with the flexibility to allocate funding within the Home ARP approved and adopted activities. Blue Sky was removed from the approved project list since they were unable to move forward. All other subrecipients will remain, and we are currently seeking a subrecipient that is willing and qualified to proceed with the development of affordable housing activity.
Thank you, Ms. Perez.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board at this point?
Sorry, guys.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? Ms. Call, one more time. Thank you. Hearing no further public comment, may I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion. I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is item 4.3. Discuss the option to increase the maximum sales price of a single-family home up to $481,176 as authorized by the State Housing Initiatives Partnership Program. Mr. Lane will lead this discussion.
Thank you. Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development, Housing Department. So the State Housing Initiative Partnership Program and Home Investment Partnership Program each have maximum purchase price limits for the sale of a single-family home to the end user, to the end buyer. Whether the assistance is directly to the homeowner in the form of a down payment assistance loan, or if the assistance is to the developer in the form of a construction loan, we have to abide by these limits. Up until recently, the maximum sales price of a home unit was $278,000. Home has, or HUD, it's a HUD program, obviously. They've raised this limit to $342,000, and we've adopted this as the maximum purchase price for a home unit in our programs. The SHIP program recently raised its allowable maximum purchase price from $349,525.80 to $481,176, nearly $500,000 for what is considered an affordable home. It's the maximum purchase price under the SHIP program that we'll be discussing this morning. We're not required to raise our maximum price to this amount in our program. We have that discretion. It's up to us whether we think it's the right thing to do. While I understand the state's trying to provide flexibility to local governments to distribute the funding to help people attain home ownership, I think such a high purchase price has pros and cons, and very likely some unintended consequences. So, for example, we're seeing a shift from in some instances to 40-year mortgages. This in and of itself has pros and cons, in my opinion. We as staff need to make a decision on this and incorporate the maximum price that we decide on into our local housing assistance plan next spring. To figure this out, the process we've chosen is to start by getting feedback from this board. With that information in hand, we'll communicate with other local governments in Pinellas County, because we really want to do this with a coordinated approach and have similarities among our programs with the other municipalities. Lastly, we'll make a recommendation to City Council regarding what staff feels these maximum purchase prices should be. Can we recess for 1 second? I need to speak for
Yes.
Ms. Rivera, if I may.
We'll take a quick recess.
So sorry. Had work to do this morning.
Good?
Yes.
Okay. I know I've had this discussion with a couple of you, in particular with Ms. Field. I don't know if you want to kind of kick us off in our discussion. I think this could be a robust discussion. There's a lot to unpack with this.
There is a lot to discuss and to unpack. Increasing the price to $481 and change, it's a huge number. And is that really affordable, is the question. The answer is, it's hard to find housing in Clearwater for less than $350. And if $350 is our max, $349, $525. If $350 is our max,
80 cents.
whatever. It's difficult for people to find affordable housing in Clearwater for $350,000. That being said, people who need affordable housing really can't afford more than $350,000. So increasing the purchase price max to $481, you're not going to get a lot of people buying at that price, but you might find someone, a family that's large enough where their income is enough, maybe they can afford that $400,000 house instead of the $350,000. That's, so, it is, just saying that $481,000 is affordable doesn't roll off the tongue.
Can we use the overhead, Rose? So I think maybe to expand on what Ms. Field is discussing, put together some numbers. Zoom a little bit.
Yeah, we can read that.
So we have for a two-person household, based on the income, the maximum monthly payment that they can make is $1,390. That gives their buying power for a purchase price. Now, this incorporates a $45,000 down payment assistance loan. That makes them for a purchase price, they can afford a home at $173,462 under a conventional loan. We've also added, as you all know, one of our most high-volume providers is Habitat for Humanity. They have access to 0% interest loans. So we have to consider that in this discussion. I think it's very important. It's a benefit to our residents. So a 0% interest loan for 30 years, they can afford $370,000 home. And they're now going to 40-year mortgages, as I understand it, and with that, they can afford a home at $478,000. This gives you some context. Now, whether or not that 40-year mortgage is something that we want to allow in a program is something else I think we need to consider along with this program, along with this decision. If you skip down to a family of six, their monthly income that they can put towards home housing is just over $2,000. Under a conventional loan, 30-year mortgage, that gives them the ability to buy a home at $231,000, 0% for 30 years, $516,000, 0% for 40 years, $673,000. So these numbers give you some context, and these are just illustrative. These numbers are not perfect. We use some assumptions to come up with these numbers. They're ballparkish. Robin can criticize them if she thinks we're off the mark with them, but I think they're good enough for the discussion. It gives you some context as to what these various households can afford and what they can't. The bottom table is obviously 120 AMI. There's a lot more buying power there. If you look at the 40-year mortgage there, technically they can afford a home over $1 million.
Yeah, right.
Now, that's not going to happen in our program. But it's just to give you some context and some additional information to consider as you talk through this.
So I have a quick question. So whether this number changes or not, it's not going to change the income requirements or the income limits for that program. So the SHIP program is the one we're looking at. No matter what that number becomes, whether it stays at 350 or goes up, those income limits are going to stay the same. So it's basically playing with the term of the mortgage to get that amount that is higher than the 350 that's currently.
Well, that's part of it. That's
Okay.
part of it. Even if it's a 30-year, if you look at these numbers at 120 for a 30-year conventional, we get up to a family of six and it's 324. When you get to the 0% interest, there's a lot more buying power there at a 30-year loan.
Right.
So it's
And Habitat is here, so if you all want to jump in with answering this question. My understanding is Habitat, you don't currently provide loans over 80% AMI, so the 0% mortgage for 30-year and 40-year really isn't available in the affordable housing marketplace. Is that correct?
yes, good point. There's very limited instances where a Habitat does loans over 80 AMI. Correct, Ken?
Very limited.
Thank you.
A couple of things of interest. Interesting statement in policies that we have to comply with is we have to, in order to access these funds, we have to sell at fair market value or the maximum sale price with your program. And so the home that we sold that we had the dedication at on Seminole, for example, the appraised value of that home is $385,000. That was maybe 2.5 months ago. And so the maximum sale price, because the funding was involved, is the $349,500. But the appraised value is $385,000. And so the adjustment for maintaining values in neighborhoods makes it a bit difficult because we in essence are selling it below market value, and the family, I think it's good, the family is walking into an equity position in the purchase of their house right off the bat to insulate them from market shifts that may happen from that perspective. But there is that conflict in the policies that is evident to us every time we sell a house as well. And so the adjustment of the market value really is something that I think needs to be addressed one way or another as we look at market values. But the consequence becomes very, very clear on the financing side as you very, very aptly addressed. Selling a house at $349 and the affordability point, and selling a house at $385 and the affordability point, our AMIs for the eligible buyers is not changing, and so everything goes down to the buying power of that individual. You know, we have 2 homes that are on the market right now, and I have seen every type of scenario as to why financing doesn't work or does work, you know, with the interested buyers on our next 2 homes. And it's complicated. It's a complicated factor from that perspective. You know, Frank and I, this last number of weeks, Frank and I, our CEO, have been reminiscing about days of yore, you know, and interest rate buy downs for the mortgage to try and make things more affordable for the buying power of our clients, you know. And how do we factor in our current interest rate, which is, you know, what the buying power is, you know, and is there a way that we can add, you know, the interest rate buy down to extend the buying power of the affordability for the buyers? You know, I don't know what the answers are, but we're looking deep into the pockets of things that we used to do years and years ago to try and address this affordability. And to me, the affordability based on what our buyers can afford to get in a mortgage really reflects more than the purchase price of the house does. And so how do we accomplish adding more tools to the buyers in order to be able to do that? Now, you know, maybe we buy in and become a Habitat affiliate and offer 0% financing. I don't know. I'm just messing with you guys. But that affordability piece really is the crux of the discussion, more so than what the sale price of the houses are.
So the people who bought that $350,000 house that valued $385,000,
Yes.
could they have afforded $385,000?
No,
They were right at their
we
limit.
broke our backs to make sure that as we worked with them, as our counselors worked with them, we made sure that everything stayed aligned for the lender and for the affordable housing programs, so that at closing date, she ticked every box that had to be ticked in order to be able to purchase that house at $349.
Right.
And that's day in and day out work.
So, if I may add to that, and some great points, that's been the history of affordable housing. You build a home, you sell it at a discount to meet the affordability criteria, right? But that 380, 350 scenario you just discussed is really interesting to me, because that's really the crux of what we're talking about here. If you went to a zero interest loan, they could afford a 380, correct?
Yeah.
So if that family needed to sell the home in a couple of years, family issues, whatever the case may be, and they're restricted to selling it to someone at 120, at 80 AMI and below, well, that's a problem, you know, and that's just, it's just limiting that homeowner's options. So that's just one of the cons, and there are pros. I'm not going to criticize 0% mortgages all day. I mean, it's a fabulous benefit to our homeowners. It's wonderful that Habitat is able to secure that, no question. It's not a criticism of that at all. It's protecting the interest of our buyers.
But is there a LURA on that home?
There has to be.
There is.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a LURA on that home, but
And I think that's the case too with Habitat homes is there's a certain amount, and maybe I'm mistaken, but there's a certain number of years that they have to stay in the home and they can't sell it, right? Or isn't there a rule of that regard in Habitat homes? Sorry, I keep looking at you guys and I'm,
I was gonna say, yeah, we have multiple layers, I'll let Sean speak
Yeah.
on my behalf. Be careful what you say.
I have my own comments here.
Yeah.
And these are just habitat comments. Shared equity provision, so there's obviously, if there's funding involved, just like any other affordable housing Sean King, Vice President Government Relations for Habitat for Humanity. Generally speaking, if there's any sort of governmental funding, and I'll just use that wide term, whether that's city or federal funding, there's going to be a land use restriction that's restricting the resale of the property. So we also have a shared equity provision that protects the equity. So in, Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing's case, where somebody's walking in the door with $40,000 worth of equity, just because of the appraisals, that it can't just be flipped, or they can't just take out a home equity mortgage for that $40,000 right away. So there's different provisions, but generally speaking, there's some sort of restriction that the land stays affordable.
Thank you.
And first right of refusal to repurchase.
Habitat always will have the first right of repurchase. Chuck's scenario, if that homeowner were to have to vacate for whatever reason, Habitat would try to repurchase that home and put another homeowner in.
Okay.
And I'm coming back for public comment whenever that's
Thank
ready.
I'm going to make a comment, and this may be, this is obviously part of the discussion, and we're not being asked to say more than just discuss this item, but I think there's a lot of moving parts in affordable housing. We all agree with that. There are things that we control and things that we don't control. And so it's tricky to think that one of the things that we control is the very limited amount of affordable housing developers that do work here in Clearwater. And so as much as for something is most definitely not affordable, those are nonprofit organizations. We're not talking about for-profit organizations that are putting a ton of money in their pocket and they're not helping, the community at large. So if an increased home value or sale price helps these organizations continue to do the work that they do in our community, I think it's worth having that conversation, whether we agree that that number is an affordable number or not, because of all these moving parts. We don't know what wages are going to look like in 10 years. They're probably going to be exactly the same as they are today, let's be honest. But we all know that there are things under our control that are completely outside of our control, like housing supply and interest rates and all these things. And there are things that are within our control. And so I urge this committee and anybody who is part of this conversation to think of that as a way to say, there's a lot of things we don't control. There are a few things that we do control. And the one thing we don't want to do, as as we showed example with the AHAC meeting just before, is we want to continue to do everything in our power to move the needle forward, however that may look. And 481 sounds like a crazy number, but maybe being closer to 400 is a solution because of those questions. Because at the end of the day, when I look at this table that Chuck is showing, at 120% of AMI, I mean these numbers are absolutely insane, but they are the reality, and we have to think of these families that are trying to stay in this community and can't because they just simply can't afford it. And so having these programs are great, but if we can't help anybody with these programs and we keep keeping that money because we can't spend it year after year because we can't find anybody to give down payments assistance to or any of these, then we're not helping anyone.
Agreed.
And so if that helps move the needle so we can help more people and then we can have more affordable housing development in Clearwater with the limited space that we have, I think that's a good movement. I think it helps, right? It moves the needle and we continue to move forward.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to increasing the number. My concern is the impression that we as the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Board gives the community that they may think we're saying 481 is affordable by doing this. I think that we need to be able to provide enough flexibility to make the program as successful as possible. And then maybe we need to start exploring options to make that 481 purchase price, or whatever, 400, whatever it is, really affordable. I have a huge concern about a 40-year mortgage. And knowing the citizens that we would be having move into these homes with a 40-year mortgage, if something happens and they have to move within 5 years, will they be upside down? Will the value of the house increase enough to justify it? Because we know that they will not have paid down principal in a short amount of time. So I have a bigger concern about encouraging a 40-year mortgage to make it affordable than I do adjusting this purchase price. So I don't know what the options are, other than continue with the down payment assistance and whatever other options we have to help citizens reach the competitive market price.
Number one, when you sell a property at a lower than value, it's going to affect the appraisals of others in the community, so you're going to start dropping those prices down.
Absolutely, it's a concern.
Yes.
I agree with you on the 40-year mortgage. That is pretty steep, especially at today's interest rates. I would like to go to the maximum at 481 because there's other things that happen. For example, gifts. I've seen people's families come up with thousands and thousands of dollars of gifts to reduce that mortgage amount and that loan to value. So you don't want to restrict other options that may come forward that we have no knowledge of. For example, I've seen families bring $100,000 to the table with down payment assistance and leveraging other financing availability with the county and so forth. So I think the state says go to 481, 176. We go to that and see what happens with it. We don't have anything to lose, really.
I would like, and I'm okay going with that, but I would like to at least put in your comments about gifts and other things that may make it affordable, which then would then kind of alleviate that impression that we think that's affordable.
Right.
Just a distinction here that I feel I want to make. And so I think a 40-year mortgage from a conventional lender at the interest rates doesn't make sense for families and affordability. But when your lender offers funding at 0% interest rate, it doesn't matter whether it's a 20 or a 30 or a 40-year. It addresses the principal payment. And if that buyer has to move, they've been doing a principal buy down of their mortgage value because it's a 0%. So I do want to make that differentiation, because there are layers of how we make things affordable.
Yes.
And so I do want to make that distinction. So in the case of Habitat going from a 30 to a 40-year, I think that's a unique strategy that may have impact, and obviously they will have studied their affordabilities and their families, and they will have made a decision on that. I want to differentiate between those two products being very, very different.
So to David's point, there's another slide here, another handout, whatever you want to call it. A 30-year conventional mortgage, 4101, right? And this is for, but that's one of the payments. At 40 years, it goes to 3923. So you're not saving a ton of money.
Yeah,
Spending on mortgage on 10 years. Now with 0% interest, it's dramatically different.
Right, yeah.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I wanted to just create that distinction, because they are two very, very different models. And I have to go back to the market value, and in all of the years I've been working in an affordable housing, there are multiple layers of what we're trying to do, and one of those layers is maintaining the stability of the housing market in our neighborhoods, and so to sell below market value is something that I think is stressful for the community and needs to be addressed with the maximum sales prices. But I think we really need to look at strategic ways of increasing the mortgage buying power of our customers.
Absolutely.
And that to me really becomes the crux of the matter, other than what the maximum sale price is. The maximum sale price should reflect what the market value is.
Well, yeah, not to mention, we keep talking about NIMBYism and how do we combat it? And if we can help in any way, shape, or form to say, this neighborhood, which is going to add an affordable home, right, is not going to feel the difference in any way, shape, or form because that house can be sold at market value, then maybe that's the way that we get more buy-in, right, into this whole conversation about affordable housing and about how it's good for the community. We keep talking about these things, and all of us as advocates, we understand that. But as we have this conversation, maybe that's one of the ways that we keep pushing past that.
I'd also like to bring up the fact that everyone requires a 40 or a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. There's other programs out there. There's adjustable rate mortgages. There's growing equity mortgages, graduated payment mortgages. So there's other options other than just a fixed rate that we as lenders and providers have never considered. So maybe we should start looking at other options. There's so many other options out there that we haven't even thought about that could come forward from our lenders, and so forth, so.
So I wanted to address a couple of things that Mr. Harder said in terms of interest rate buy down to make it more affordable. And there are two different ways to buy down the interest rate. There's where you just pay points, 1 point equals 1% of the loan amount, excuse me, and it lowers your interest rate by some amount. The other one that has been touted for about a year now is called either a 3-2-1 buy down or a 2-1 buy down, where for on a 2-1 buy down, for the first year, your interest rate is 2% lower than what the market rate is. For the next year, it's 1% lower, and then it goes back to the market rate. The issue there is, and that's a great program, it helps people in the beginning, and then maybe as interest rates lower, they can refinance. The problem is that those programs can only be paid for by the seller. And so even like any down payment assistance that a buyer might get can't be used to pay for that. So now you have to get a seller to buy into that. Now if it's a nonprofit seller, for example, Tempe Neighborhood Housing, maybe they'd be willing to do that, but that helps make it more affordable, but it can only be provided by the seller. So.
And the risk, what's 2 years from now going to look like as far as interest rate, what's 3 years, and again, families that we sell homes to, don't have a lot of flexibility and risk, period. My son and his wife, 5 years ago, they bought their first home. They went into a 5-year ARM. Actually, they went into a 3-year ARM, and they were incredibly fortunate that they could relock right before the interest rates started to rise, because I suspect that I might have been helping them pay their mortgage if they would have had to lock afterwards, And so that volatility of the market is something I think we have to pay special attention to with our types of buyers. But I feel that we've got to look at all of those financing options as to how we address affordability in light of what our market values are today.
Exactly.
So 7 years ago when we were selling homes for $250,000 or whatever, we had a lot more cards on the table. It was a lot more flexible. But with market values today, there's a very, very important discussion that we have, and I think we have to put, like you said, we've got to put everything on the table and put it through the grinder to see what are good options to help maintain the affordability under the current market conditions.
Well, and the one problem is, going back to what you said, and I think, Robin, you were the one asking the question, we were talking about the home that Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services sold a couple months ago, and how if it hadn't been at the limit that it is currently at, your buyer wouldn't have been able to afford it. So we have to think of that as well, because if bringing that number up is serving a different audience, what do we do about the audience that we're currently serving? And who is going to serve them if it's not the current providers? Because at the end of the day, we talk about 80% of AMI and 120% of AMI, but there's a ton of people even under that 80% that, that doesn't necessarily affect in that sense, but that we have to keep thinking about, because those shifts in interest rate and market rates and all these things, and the fact that wages, for example, don't go up as fast, are going to create an issue regardless of the solution that we come up with.
And perhaps the solution is, there are, besides the down payment assistance that the city of Clearwater provides, there are other avenues of down payment assistance that can be combined, and that may be, and I know that's one of the AHAC committee's incentives, to bring in maybe employer assistance, and getting employers to buy into, your teachers or your nurses or your orderlies want to live here, and maybe you can help them buy their houses here.
Another thing to try to avoid is reduced mortgage insurance premiums on an FHA loan and private mortgage insurance on conventional, which can cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, as you know, Robin, a month added to. So your down payment should cover 20% down, which then eliminates private mortgage insurance and reduces MIP from a 30-year payment to an 11-year payment with a reduced renewal premium. So there's so many things to consider. We need to put this on paper and design our programs around what's affordable and define affordable. It's not just 30%, it's just not payment and income. There's more to the definition.
So regardless of where we set the maximum purchase price, right, they're still limited by, one, the appraised value. We're not going to buy the property for more than it's worth. Two, what that income bracket, what that buyer can afford.
Exactly.
So we still have those limitations.
May I jump in? You know I can't just sit still. Sorry. Denise Anderson, Economic Development and Housing. So, Linda, I'm glad you brought up PMI. I ran some back-of-the-envelope figures yesterday, and looking at amortization, well, a couple things. One, at the maximum purchase price of $481 and change, our down payment assistance in order to get to that 20% would need to go to $92,500.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm not suggesting that that's impossible for us, but as we contemplate, the very limited dollars that we have, a couple of things. One, we want to make sure that we're producing and preserving as many units as possible. That's our mission. That may help us get there, right? Because that helps generate additional activity, but it may also limit us in other areas when it comes to construction or other things. So I think from a staff level, we really need to take a look at the unintended consequences of adjusting that down payment assistance. And I think it's very much worth exploring that. Maybe our down payment assistance program is always 20% of whatever that purchase price is. Maybe that's how we fashion the program to ensure no PMI is required.
And it could be 10%. 10% would at least reduce the MIP and the PMI on a renewal. It doesn't necessarily have to be 20% will eliminate it. FHA, you never eliminate it. You just reduce the payment and you reduce the term. But if you gave 10% down, that would substantially, and on a $400,000 purchase price, that'd be isn't that $40,000?
The other thing, when we look at housing costs, right, that front-end ratio, we're looking at principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So some of the things that you all were discussing is what are the things that we can influence. Unfortunately, we cannot influence insurance and taxes. And in some cases, we can't influence interest rates either, right? So So there really is just very few avenues that we have available to us, whether we're talking at the NAHAB level or at the staff level, in order to be able to influence the affordability of our home buyers. So I think, and as Chuck suggested at the beginning of this conversation, we really wanted to have this discussion, and I'll look forward to public comment as well, Sean. I think it's really important that we have this discussion and that we have it in a public format, so that people can kind of noodle over it. I'm sure council will be listening to this at some point as well. And it will give us the opportunity to go back, talk to other jurisdictions about the things that we're hearing today, ask them to have similar conversations perhaps, and then we can come back and sort of look at more real numbers, right? The figures that you all saw today are some presumptions related to escrow, related to median sales price, related to some of those things in today's current conventional mortgage rates, which some, we may be able to reduce some of those with some of the programs that they have access to. So there's a lot to chew on, certainly, but I wanted to suggest to you that, in addition to raising a maximum sales price, we also need to look at what else can we do, like down payment assistance, to help those home buyers maximize their purchase value, or their purchase power.
So I will say that other jurisdictions here in Pinellas County, the city of St. Petersburg, their maximum down payment assistance is $60,000. Both Largo and Pinellas County are at $75,000.
Right.
The other thing I wanted to say in terms of the PMI, at certain credit score minimums, there is a way to actually pay for the PMI up front. So you're making the interest rate slightly higher, but that might add, maybe that adds $50 to their payment, but you're getting rid of a $200 PMI payment. So that's another way to perhaps, use the assistance to prepay for the PMI. Unfortunately, on an FHA, you can't do that, but on conventional, you can.
So, may I jump in again, Chuck? Sorry.
Say no?
No. So the other thing, we showed you some tables where, depending on household size, that purchase power changes, right? Because the different income caps exist. So but we haven't really heard anything about that. Is there interest in us exploring some sort of program where a cap is established based on household size? I didn't hear that. So right now, I would say that that's not something you wish us to explore, but I didn't hear anybody discuss it either. Is there value in exploring some sort of tiered system based on household size?
I don't think there is. I think it's just going to be based on, obviously, the larger the household, the higher the income limit, the higher the purchase price that they can afford. Now, does a single person need that 5-bedroom house? One would think not. But
unless they're turning it into an affordable housing community house, right?
A shared housing
And then
situation.
I guess we can discuss it.
But then it becomes a 3-person house.
I know.
Any other comments from the board?
So you're not interested in a tiered approach? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm visual, I'd have to look at it
Yeah.
and understand it before I could make any type of comment on a tiered approach. So I would love to see that, to see what the impact would be, but I don't, unfortunately, I'm very visual in that aspect. So I would really have to look at it and study it before I'd have any type of intelligent response. If I have an intelligent response.
You usually do.
Thank you. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? I hope.
He's back.
Does he have to spell the meeting?
Good morning, Sean King, K-I-N-G, Habitat for Humanity. I'm wearing a couple of different hats here. One, obviously, Habitat, and I want to go on the record with a couple of things because we were mentioned and we were in this handout or whatever. SHIP goes up to 120%. Habitat only serves 80% and under. When you look at 120% AMI for a 3-person household, that's up to $93,000, okay? That's 2 teachers, young teachers with a small child. They can afford above $350 at that household income. This isn't about Habitat, 0% interest mortgage, blah, 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 blah. It goes up to 120. So this is, we're talking about. My whole point, I sit on the Pinellas AHAC as well. We're having this very conversation. And what you're deciding here is going to impact Pinellas and Largo. St. Pete's already at it. My point is, why arbitrarily cap it? Let the market decide. You guys did an excellent job, and at the risk of changing any views or opinions, I should probably just shut up and sit down, but you've talked about the different options available in the marketplace, whether it's buy downs, whether it's arms, whether it's, you talked about in the AHAC meeting, partnerships with private companies. Amazon is investing $2 billion nationwide in affordable housing. Part of that money is in home ownership to provide below market rate loans to potential homeowners in the markets that they serve. That could come here tomorrow. We once thought $350,000 cap was crazy. We would never get there. 200 was our max. Now we're way past that. So to steal a hockey term, we need to skate where the puck is going, not where the puck is at. And I think that's the conversation we were having today. And I just want to continue that because, we never thought. The interest rate today is 7.5%. Do you know what the interest rate was on February 1st? It was at 6% on February 1st. It's gone up that much. So all of these charts and everything may not mean anything tomorrow or in 6 months from now. Affordability might be different. The other number I want to pull, and I was doing it while I was here, on Zillow right now, there are 115 homes in the city of Clearwater under $450,000. There are 51 under $350,000. Of those 51, I'm sure some of them are yours, of those 51, 15 of them are 3 bedrooms or larger. That's what we're dealing with. So if you're looking at a family or that starter home, it's all above $350. There's no way. And if you don't allow for stackable down payment assistance, buy downs, things like that, and just have this arbitrary cap, then you're denying people the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for staff for all this.
Appreciate the afterthought.
Any other public comment?
Yes, Terry, please.
Terry is not public, she's staff.
That's right.
Just want to respond to Sean,
Terry,
comment. Oh, Terry Malcolm Smith, City of Clearwater. Even though SHIP allows us to go up to 120% of median income, it's a very small percentage of folks that we can help. Because with the SHIP program, X amount has to go to 50% or below, 80% or below. So there is really nothing to assist folks that are over 80. So we have to be mindful that who we're serving are people that are 80% or below median income.
Thank you. No other public comment. Ms. Call, any e-comments? Thank you.
So we'll go through our process, and I'll report back to the NAHAB on this. Don't know where we'll end up, but really good discussion. I appreciate the discussion from Sean, and we'll see where we end up on it. I do believe that an increase is in order. Home is 80% AMI and below exclusively, and we're at 342. SHIP can serve a higher income bracket, although as Terry said, we're very limited, but we can. So I will report back to the board with progress on this.
Thank you. This was a discussion item, and the board does not need to take any action on that item. Item number 5 is the director's report. Mr. Lane, the floor is yours again if you have anything additional to report.
I don't. I didn't have time to prepare my director's report this morning. I was trying to put together some other stuff. So, we do have a NAHAB meeting in December. One thing I do want to mention in December, it's very important that we have a quorum. You are going to be asked to approve our year-end report. It's due to HUD by December 31st. If we don't have this public hearing with the NAHAB, we run the risk of not meeting that deadline. So if any of you are not able to make that meeting, you need to let me know as soon as you know. So I can, if we have to move the date, we can. We'd rather not do that, so please let me know.
Thank you.
May I add something?
Please.
So also in December, along with the CAPER, recall a recommendation earlier this year that we do a report out on the performance of our public services and facilities project, or projects rather. So while those will be reported within the CAPER, I talked with you a couple of months ago about having a discussion about the performance of those individual nonprofits throughout the year and how they utilize the funding or the challenges or issues we may have run into with construction projects or what have you. So that will also be coming to you in December. I think that will be an interesting discussion as we move into our competitive grant cycle. And perhaps we can also take the time in December, if not in December, then in January, talking about that new cycle. We're going to be changing our approach. I think we've mentioned that to you, that we're going to limit the number of public services projects we'll consider. We'll limit the number of public facilities projects we'll consider. The upside of that is a couple of things. One, those public services projects will get funding at a much higher level. It will be obviously much more competitive as a result. Not everybody will receive funding, most will not. And similarly, in public facilities, we'll be increasing the cap out of the gate, and we will only be accepting applications for public facilities projects during the open application cycle. That is unlike past practice. So we'll be increasing the maximum amount for public facilities. We'll, for the first time, we'll be offering, so our current process is we do reimbursement only on public facilities, so that nonprofit has to put money out on a construction, show proof of payment, we get a canceled check, copy of that, and then we'll issue the reimbursement to that nonprofit for the expenses they've already incurred. Going forward, because we're increasing that maximum value, we understand the cash flow of nonprofits is often very strapped. And so we'll be providing that funding to them in tranches in advance. So they should never be, except for last payment, they should never be on a reimbursement basis. They should have those funds from us in order to pay those contractors. So some really significant and important changes, and we want to make sure everybody is comfortable with that. So that will either be in December or probably more likely January, because December is already kind of a heavy day. But just wanted to let you know what you can expect in the next month or so.
I appreciate your thoughts and work on that project. That makes the grant application so much more important for our nonprofits to take time and think about what they put in it, because the scoring will become so much more important as to whether they receive funding or not. And I think that should improve the applications that we see. Thank you.
Great.
Do any board members have any final comments before we adjourn?
I do have something that I wrote down, and it has nothing to do with what we discussed in the NAHAB meeting, but it has to do with something that we saw in the final report that we approved for the AHAC. I guess my question to you, Chuck, or to you, Denise, is what can we do as NAHAB and former AHAC members to help in making sure that you're 100% staffed? Because I know that's been an issue in the past. But that's a conversation we had last month at the AHAC meeting, talking about, some of the openings and some of the work that you're not able to do just because you just don't have enough team members. So I just wanted to ask the question if there was anything that we can do or assist in any way to make sure that that happens.
We do have an open recruitment for a housing specialist, which is going to help the city council approved the additional FTE with the budget this year. So that's a great start. In terms of what you can do moving forward, Denise, do you have any recommendations?
Sure. Chuck. So a couple of things. One, in fact, Chuck and I were just having this conversation yesterday. We have been incredibly blessed with our ability to retain employees. We have a wonderful, wonderful team, and we're not plagued with some of the challenges that other departments are facing. I'm very excited to see the results of a compensation and classification study that will be going to, I have not seen it yet, but it will be going to our city council for their consideration for implementation in January. And I expect that many of our employees across the city, most employees across the city will I think, see some pretty significant increases to their salaries as a result of that study. So I'm looking forward to the outcomes from that. I'm flying a little blind in what they mean for individual staff members, including myself. I have no idea. So hopefully that will certainly help us continue to retain the excellent staff that we have. Since COVID, to have some perspective, had this discussion to some level yesterday with council. Since COVID, we've received, to include the Hallmark funding that you heard about today, we've received $7.2 million, which is significant. It's certainly not as much as St. Pete or the county or our larger jurisdictions have received, but that very much has a very significant impact on staffing and our ability to expend those funds. 7.2 million, I should say, in one-time allocations, those special funds, CV funds, CRF funds, ARPA, Hallmark. So since 2020, we have added senior real estate services coordinator, Dylan Mayhew, whom you got to talk with today. That's a new position just last year. Prior to that, we had an opening for a housing specialist. You heard from Danya Perez today. She has, we have a promotion ability within the team, and she is now a housing coordinator through promotions that she's earned. So that is also a new FTE since COVID. And this one that we're recruiting right now is another new FTE. So it's not that we had a vacancy. As of October 1, we had a new FTE added to our team. So the city has responded well to that growth that's necessary. I was hesitant, in full disclosure, hesitant to add FTEs when you get one-time allocations. That's a very dangerous thing to do. It's not good practice from a budgetary perspective, but because of the changes with SHIP and they can no longer sweep the SHIP funding, we've seen extraordinary increases in SHIP allocations. So with a level of confidence, we made the recommendation to add the FTE. So that's a lot, I get that. But in looking at all of your AHAC recommendations, I think they're really important and wonderful, but what you'll also see in there is a lot of marketing and promotion, a lot of outreach, things like that. So I suspect, council, if you're listening, I suspect that in the next budget cycle, there may well be another FTE request to be able to handle those kinds of important communications, outreach, marketing, whether it's digital, print, whether it's going out in the community, those require staffing hours and different types of expertise than what you typically see perhaps out of our team, which is very much transactional and specialized in the funding sources themselves. So stay tuned. You'll be hearing about that. To answer your question, you can advocate when we make a request. You can advocate and talk about the changes you expect to see as NAHAB, the assignments that you're asking us to execute on, that those have staffing impacts, and those are important components to you. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it, and I've gone on the record for when council listens to this.
Right.
Anything else?
No, that was it. Thank
Any
you.
other comments? I just want to thank staff for your hard work and dedication, and Ms. Warner, through this process. We have really moved the needle, I believe, at least in the conversation side, and I appreciate that. As you know, the work of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is complete. Next meeting of the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Advisory Board is scheduled for December 12th at 9 a.m. here in council chambers. Meeting is adjourned.